Welcome y'all to Robin on the Farm. Today I'm making this loaf of double chocolate sourdough bread. This sourdough bread has cocoa, chocolate chips, vanilla, brown sugar. Oh, it is so good. And it's so easy. Even beginners can make this bread. Let's get started on our double chocolate sourdough bread. I'm going to give you the measurements in grams, but also cups and spoons. So we're going to get started with our sourdough starter. I'm going to use my sourdough starter Hester. This is what it is on my website. If you need some sourdough starter, this is the freeze-dried sourdough starter Hester. I'm going to use 85 grams or a third of a cup of this sourdough starter. You can see it's active. Oh, this is some good established starter. So make sure your scale is zeroed out if you're using a scale, and put in 85 grams of starter. It's always the hard part. I always tend to over measure. Well, there we go. That's pretty good. I'm going to zero out my scale, and I'm going to add 200 grams of water, or 3/4 of a cup. You want this to be warm water, about 100 degrees. You just don't want it too warm to kill your wild yeast, and you don't want it too cold so that it doesn't let your yeast get activated. Now I went a little bit over. I'm just going to take it a little bit. Okay, pretty close. 200 grams of water. Now give that a good mix. This just helps if you already have your sourdough starter and your water mixed together before you add in your other ingredients. All right, next I'm going to use some brown sugar. I want 40 grams of brown sugar, or that's about 3 packed tablespoons of brown sugar. So zero out your scale and put in 40 grams. Okay, 40 grams of brown sugar. That's just light brown sugar. You can use dark brown sugar. That works fine too. Next, I'm going to use some of this pure vanilla extract, and I want about 1.5 teaspoons or 7 grams. Zero out my scale. Okay. So 7 grams. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to give this a good mix again before I add my flour and my other ingredients. Ooh, this is smelling good with that brown sugar and that vanilla. Ooh, I'm excited for this double chocolate sourdough bread. Okay, zero out your scale again. Get it back to 0 grams. Now I'm going to add some bread flour. I want 300 grams of bread flour. You can also use all-purpose. I'm using bread flour today. That's about 2.5 cups of flour. So 300 grams of flour, just add it right on into your bowl. Okay, 300 grams or 2.5 cups. And next we want some cocoa powder. You can use Dutch press, you can use Hershey's, whatever you want to use, but I'm going to use 30 grams of this cocoa powder, which is about 1/4 cup. And I'm going to sift it because cocoa powder is always a little bit chunky. So I'm going to add 30 grams. This is going to make it a lot easier to mix up if you've already sifted it. Okay. There we go, 30 grams. And now zero out your scale one more time, and it's time for some salt. I'm going to use my favorite Redmond's Real Salt, and I'm going to use 6 grams or 1 teaspoon of salt. There we go. All right, those are all of our ingredients for our double chocolate sourdough bread. Now, I'm just gonna mix these ingredients together. That's not true, actually. After we let this dough bulk ferment, then we're gonna add some chocolate chips. So that's the double chocolate part, and that's what makes it even better. So I'm gonna take a minute and just mix this up really well until a nice shaggy dough forms. Oh, and this is smelling like brownie batter. Oh my goodness, smells so good. Now don't be alarmed if it seems too dry. It is gonna kind of seem like that, but keep mixing it and it will get better. This spurtle is really nice to mix your sourdough breads with. I also like using Danish dough whisks or wooden spoons, but this spurtle is really my favorite. So once you mix it up good enough with your spurtle or whatever you're using, I like to get in there with my hands. Just helps to really get the dough together. So make sure your hands are nice and clean and get in there and just kind of work in the rest of that dry flour and cocoa powder, because you'll find that it's a lot more wet in the middle of your ball of dough right now than it is on the outside. This helps to kind of get it all incorporated together. You may think that it's too dry as you do this, but really just keep working it and it'll all work out. Okay, I spent about a minute or two stirring with the spurtle, and then I got in there with my hands, and I've done this for about another 2 minutes, and this is looking great. This is what you want your dough to look like. Now I'm gonna cover this dough with some plastic wrap, and I'm gonna let it bulk ferment on the counter anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. So you just want it to sit on your counter just like this, and in just a few hours I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna add the chocolate chips and shape it. So I'll show it to you at that point. Okay, it's time to shape our double chocolate sourdough bread. Look at this. This has been rising on the countertop doing a bulk ferment for about 5 hours. I always say about 3 to 5 hours, and this is what it looks like at about 5 hours. So this looks great. But now it's time to do one set of stretch and folds as we shape this bread. And I'm gonna go ahead and put in my chocolate chips. These are just plain old semi-sweet chocolate chips, but you can use anything that you want. I'm gonna use a half a cup, which is about 75 grams of chocolate chips. And there's lots of different ways that you can add inclusions to your bread, but I'm gonna just do it the easy way today. I'm just gonna go ahead and pour that in there, and we're gonna do our stretch and folds, and these are gonna get all incorporated in the dough. So you're gonna grab your dough from one side, and it should be stretchy, and then you pull it over to the other side. You grab it from the other side and you stretch it. Pull it over, stretch it. These are really considered stretch and folds. But at the same time that you're doing these stretch and folds, you're shaping your bread. And as you do it, it goes from being really nice and stretchy to a little bit harder to stretch and a little bit better of a ball of dough. This is developing the gluten in your sourdough bread. Okay, so that's looking good. You see that? All of our chocolate chips are incorporated into our dough really well. And it's okay if there's some on the bottom. It's totally fine. I'm gonna go ahead and flip this over. There we go. Oh, doesn't that look nice? Okay, now I'm gonna cover up my ball of dough so it doesn't dry out. Now, once you get your sourdough bread to this point, you have some options, and I think it makes it really flexible and great. At this point, you let it rest for at least an hour on the countertop, and then you score it, and it'll be ready to go into the oven to bake. Or you can put it in the refrigerator for a few hours until you're ready to bake it. Or you can even put it in the refrigerator and leave it in there overnight, up to 2 or 3 days until you're ready to bake it. So those are some really good options when you're making sourdough bread. Make it work for you, do whatever's convenient, have this bread ready when you want it. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw this into my refrigerator because I'm not quite ready to bake this bread. But I also really like to put this dough in my refrigerator because I think it gives you a little bit better oven spring when your dough is cold and then you put it into the oven. The oven spring is the rise that you get when you put it in the oven. So I kind of like my dough to go into the refrigerator for a little bit, and then I like to bake it. So that's what I'm gonna do today, but you choose what you wanna do. I will show you this bread when it's time to score the dough and then throw it in the oven. All right, I'm ready to bake our double chocolate sourdough bread. I just got my oven preheated to 450 degrees. I've had my Dutch oven in there preheating also. And now I'm ready to score our chocolate sourdough bread. This has been resting in the refrigerator for a few hours, and that's just because I wasn't quite ready to bake it. And I also think that you get a lot better oven spring when you let it chill in the fridge for a few hours. So oven spring is when it rises even more in the oven and it gives you a really pretty loaf of bread. So this is looking good, it's cool. It also helps when you chill it in the fridge for a little bit before you score it. It's just a little bit easier to score. So I'm just gonna do a really simple score because this doesn't need much. Already has the chocolate chips in it, and it's gonna be so good. So when you score it, you wanna go about 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep into the dough. And this just helps it to not burst when it's baking in the oven. Maybe I'll add a few little things. There we go. So this isn't anything special. It's just gonna help it not to burst. I'm just gonna throw this dough into my hot Dutch oven. Now I'm gonna let this loaf bake at 450 degrees for 35 minutes, and then I'm gonna take the top off. I do not want this loaf to burn at all on the bottom, so a good trick is to put a cookie sheet underneath the Dutch oven. That'll help it to not burn. Now that it's been baking for 35 minutes, oh my goodness, look how good that looks. Now it's time to take the lid off. And I'm also gonna reduce the temperature from 450 to 425. And I'm gonna let it continue baking for 10 more minutes just to crisp up the crust and let it finish baking. If you wanna be sure that your sourdough bread is done and you have a food thermometer, you want your bread to be about 205 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, I've let my double chocolate chip sourdough bread cool just a bit, and I am ready to cut into this and to eat it. Oh, it smells so good. There it is. Oh, doesn't that look good? It's baked all the way through. You can see the chocolate chips dispersed throughout the whole thing. Oh, that looks so good. Okay, I can't wait to take a bite. I'm gonna cut into it with my bow knife over here on the side. I really like the outer edges of my sourdough. Oh, I just like this. Okay, so I'm just taking a little tiny piece right here just to try it out. It is so good. This is just a really fun and different sourdough bread to try. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, give this recipe a try. I will leave the recipe for this double chocolate sourdough bread down in the description and on my website, robinonthefarm.com. You can also find these really cute beeswax bread bags that my daughters and I make together. And my husband and son make these teakwood cutting boards. And if you're needing some sourdough starter, I have my freeze-dried sourdough starter also on the website. Thank you so much for being here with me on Robin on the Farm. I will see you next time. This double chocolate sourdough bread is so good toasted. I wanted to show you how I enjoy this bread best. I love to eat this chocolate sourdough bread with some good preserves. I really like strawberry best, but I don't have that now. So this is strawberries, cherries, raspberries. Oh, and this just makes it so good. It's kind of like a chocolate covered strawberry when you eat it this way. I just think it really takes this bread up a notch. So this is toasted, has some delicious preserves on it, and this is the way that I like to eat this bread. So this is just a suggestion. Try it toasted with some preserves and you are gonna love it. Amazing.
Robin's in the kitchen, dough beneath her hands, wheat from the fields and eggs from her land. Sunlight through the window, a warm golden glow. She's working hard to make that dough.